Hello. Today's chapter starts with a reflection on Edward Colston's statue being brought down in Bristol in one of the many ripple impacts of the horrendous murder of George Floyd. Edward Colston was apparently honoured with that statue as a result of his generous philanthropy. But hang on a minute, did he not in fact make that money on the back of the lives of the 80,000 slaves that he traded in? Attention has been rightly drawn recently to thinking whether or not we really should immortalise such people. From statues across our towns and cities to the many walls of National Trust stately homes around Britain, our shameful past. Arun and Arora suggest it might be time to look for different heroes, different people to look up to. So this leads me on to the subject of today's chapter. You may not have heard of him, but you will have heard of his best friend, but more of him in a minute. Today's hero is Charles Freer Andrews, and he was a Christian missionary at the time of the cruelties of the British Empire, but thankfully he was one of the good guys. Charles went to India in 1904 and taught in a Christian college in Delhi, bringing with him a deep passion for the justice in the Bible and for Jesus' bias for the poor and downtrodden. He was shocked and dismayed at the endemic racism at the heart of the British Empire, and he fought for the rights and freedoms of the Indian nation. Reading about Charles's actions has reminded me of something that Bruce and Louise Naden shared with us on their last visit from South Africa. That word, intentionality. Charles let his life be guided by the intentional steps that he took to confront the injustice inherent in British colonialism. He worked really hard to support the movement for Indian independence from Britain, using his position to be the middleman to help Mahatma Gandhi in his negotiations with the British government. Charles was particularly outraged by a system called indentured labour, which was a practice that saw thousands of Indians work in near slave-like conditions in other parts of the British Empire, and he was a key person in the campaign to bring a stop to it. Charles was a really close friend of Gandhi, and their friendship was really important to both of them. Mahatma Gandhi and Rabindranath Tagore, who was another famous Indian spiritual leader, both said of Charles that he stopped them losing their faith in white British people. Gandhi called him heroic, and Tagore said he was a friend to all humanity. There are so many things in Charles's life that I find inspiring. For instance, he stood down from an offer to be the vice principal of the college that he taught at, thankfully recognising that that role more appropriately belonged to an Indian academic. Sometimes as a white person, I too need to stand aside and for once shut up to allow a person with less privilege than me to take their right place, whether that's in work or at church. With his great friend Gandhi, Charles was really interested in interfaith harmony and developing interfaith tolerance and understanding. For me, his respect for all people really shone through. I try to imagine what it would have been like to be such a close friend of such an awesome, charismatic person like Gandhi. Quite humbling, I would have thought. But I think that I would just be tempted to agree with everything that Gandhi said. Yet Charles was a true friend who would also challenge Gandhi into thinking deeper and more critically in some areas. An instance of that is that in the early stage of his political career, Gandhi was a supporter of the British demands for Indians to fight for the Allies in the European War, World War I. But this was something that went against their shared beliefs in non-violence, and Charles challenged Gandhi on this. He was also really vocal with others about the urgent need to emancipate the Dalits, who were the lowest rung of the caste system in India. Thinking about Charles for this reflection has made me see that my humble efforts to do good here and there are just that, just small humble efforts. And he has challenged me to renew my commitment to seek God's justice locally and in the world.